We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Imbibe Live Online, supported by Mezcal Center. I'm Jacopo Mazzeo, news editor at Imbibe. Really excited to be here. Today, we are taking a deep dive into UK drinks, spanning the entire drinks industry from beer to wine and spirits. And what we want to do is showcasing just how we have seen such a huge increase in buying locally and supporting local producers recently. So on the panel today, we have Sarah Marshall. She is lab manager and brewer for Shepherd's Neame Brewery in Kent. Henry Rimmel, sales and marketing manager at Simpson's Wine Estate in Kent, again. And Angus Luxden, co-founder and director of Salcombe Distilling in Devon. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Jen.
Hello.
Okay, so the way we are going to do this is that each of our guests is going to give a short presentation on their products, and then we are going to have a Q&A session afterwards. Feel free to get involved in the Q&A session. Sarah, do you want to start with your presentation?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Let's go.
Right, hello, welcome. I'm Sarah, as Jacob said. I'm from Shepherd's Neame, lab manager. I've been here 10 years. Shepherd's Neame is Britain's oldest brewer, but Faversham has been brewing a long, long time before Shepherd's Neame was established. And there's historical data saying that the priory built in Faversham in 1147 had evidence of a brew house where the monks would brew on site, and they would sell to the local community as well. So Faversham itself has been brewing since 1147. But it wasn't until 1570 when the son of the last monk in the priory bought 18 Court Street, which is our current premises, and started brewing there. This premises moved on to a different family group in 1698, which was the start of the line of our current predecessor's ancestry. And so that is our official established date of 1698. So as you can see from the pictures, Faversham has been brewing a long time. So our history goes back a long, long way. Now we're on to our 5th generation as an independent family brewer. Our current CEO is 5th generation in his family, so we're very proud of that it's still a family run business. We brew over 16 million pints a year. We have over 300 pubs and hotels across the southeast of the UK and export to over 35 different countries, and that all provides over 4,500 jobs throughout Kent and the southeast. We do use over 80% local hops, most are all grown in Kent, some of them grown within 40 miles of the brewery, so very local. And that's partly why Kent is nicknamed the Garden of England, because of the hop gardens. There are thousands of different flavours found within beer, and they're all derived from the raw materials and the brewing process. Our brewing process here at Shepherd's Neame is not that far different from many other UK brewers, but we like to feel that our raw materials, especially our hops, are particularly special because they're so local. So typical raw materials in brewing: malted barley, hops, water and yeast. Each brewery holds their own strain of yeast, so it's unique to that brewery. And as I said, hops are our main thing that we try singing about, especially in the Kentish ales. Water is drawn up from the well beneath the brewery, so again, it's unique to Shepherd's Neame. Malt, we use all UK malt, so not as local as Kent. There's not much growing room left in Kent anymore, but it's all from Suffolk and around that surrounding area. So still UK grown, but not quite Kent grown. Majority of our recipes use ale or lager malt, so it gives that warm biscuity back note to it. And then as you increase the colour of the malt, you increase the colour of the beer. So if you're brewing like a porter or a stout, you tend to put more chocolate malt in, and it gives you those coffee, caramel and burnt notes. But most of our Kentish ales, we tend to put crystal malt in, giving it a lovely soft caramel malt loaf back note behind the hops. And hops are the main attraction of Kentish ales. They have three main purposes: bitterness, so they naturally contain alpha acids, which as you add heat, get isomerized into isoalpha acids, which create bitterness. And aroma, the essential oils within hops create different aromas. So different varieties have different essential oils producing different aromas and flavors. And as a bonus, hops also have an antimicrobial effect, so they act as a very good preservative. So the more hops you have in a beer, the more preserved a beer is going to be. And these are some of the flavors that can come across with some of the hops. So when we're talking particularly about Kentish hops, we tend to look more in the spicy black pepper sort of notes and the herbal mixed herbs. It does cross over slightly into citrus. We do know that East Kent Goldings, when you get a particularly good batch of East Kent Goldings, can go orange marmalade flavour. So it does sort of cross over some of these different categories. But you tend to find the big citrus flavours comes more from the American hops. So it's more about the herbal spicy notes for Kentish hops. Very typical British hop flavour. And why we're so very proud of Kentish ales is because there's mainly only two hop growing regions within the UK, and that's Kent and Hereford. That's mainly based because hops are quite fussy where they grow. They only like growing a certain latitude across the world, and Kent falls into that category, and that's to do with day length. We also have the right soil type here, the right climate, good length of day and sunlight, and also it's from in the past to do with the wealthy farmers. So to set up a hop garden would have cost a lot of money, and to create the poles and the wires and stringing all the hops up. So initially it would have been a very heavy investment to install hop gardens within your farm. So it needed a lot of investment initially. So it would have been wealthy hop farmers that would have done that. It also required, before the use of machinery, would have required a lot of seasonal workers. And that was helped in Kent by a lot of Londoners coming down for their summer holidays to do hop picking. And they would come down and spend the whole of August doing hop picking. It would be very labour intensive, picking out each individual hop off the vine. And in Hereford, they had a lot of the Welsh coming over for their summer holidays to do hop picking. So it's regional to where they could get quite a lot of cheap labour. But what we're particularly proud of down in Kent is a hop called East Kent Goldings. And this is specifically grown in East Kent. If you grow it anywhere else in the world, it's just Goldings, and it cannot be labelled as East Kent Goldings. So it has protected geographical indication. And we use that hop particularly in our Kentish ales because it gives a really lovely, spicy, herbal, earthy aroma to our Kentish ales. And that's very typical of our Kentish ales. So East Kent Goldings is one of, I'm not sure there are any other hops, but it's certainly one of very few hops that has protected geographical indication. And hence why we can then use that for our Kentish ale, which again is audited to protected geographical indication as a European standard. The water, as I said, is unique to Shepherd Neame, is drawn up through a well underneath the brewery. We do demineralise it and then add salts back in, partly because we tend to make quite a lot of different beer styles here. So you tend to replicate the water for where that area is famous for that beer style. So Burton is very famous for its pale ales, but it has quite a high sulfate content. So you tend to dose in more sulfates, and that creates a drier, crisper, more bitter flavour to your beer. Yeast, unique to each of the breweries. We have our own strain here, and it contributes to a lot of the different flavours within our beers. But what makes the Kentish ale really a Kentish ale is it's brewed in a traditional single infusion mash. So it gets mashed in at 63 degrees, and the temperature doesn't change for an hour. So it sits at 63 degrees, and all the sugars come out of the malt into the water, and that's what we use to brew with. That's where the sugars to be converted into alcohol and carbon dioxide come from. The water is obviously from Kent, is drawn up through our borehole. The specific yeast strain to make Kentish ale is our own ale yeast found within our brewery. And Kentish ales have to be golden brown in colour. So going back to the raw materials, we add a bit of crystal malt to make it that lovely golden brown colour, which also adds a bit of caramel to the flavour. But it's really the Kentish hops. You have to use Kentish hops to make a Kentish ale. So that produces the lovely strong English hop aroma that you get to Kentish ales, leaving a balanced, full bitterness. So Kentish ales do tend to be quite high in bitterness and heavy in that English hop aroma. And our Kentish hops tend to be First Gold, East Kent Goldings, Target and Challenger. And they are all grown within Kent, most of them within a 40-mile radius to the brewery here. So East Kent Goldings obviously has to be grown in East Kent, and we can trace all of our hops back to Kentish farms, which is very important for us. So all of our raw materials are very local, which is good. And here is an example of some of our more famous Kentish ales. Master Brew is enjoyed by a lot of our locals. It's incredibly good on draft, so in cask. And Spitfire is probably our biggest brand, both nationally and internationally. Bishop's Finger is a personal favourite. Absolutely love that. You get much more esters on that, so you get some lovely fruitcake aromas coming through, but it's a bit stronger in ABV, that one, so it's 5.4 in alcohol in bottle. And then 1698 is our Kentish Strong Ale. That's bottle conditioned, and that's a superb one. Goes really nicely with cheese, that one. I think that is me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Henry Ryman, the Sales and Marketing Manager here at Simpson's Wine Estate. We're based down near Barham, near Canterbury in Kent, East Kent. It's owned by Charles and Ruth Simpson, who have I'm just waiting to see if somebody can hear me. I'm sorry, there's a few technical issues. But I'll keep going for the time being, otherwise I can start again. So
yes, we can. Harry, go
ahead. We're in the country, so you got me now? Okay, so my name is Henry Ryman. I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager here at Simpson's Wine Estate. Based here at Barham, near Canterbury in Kent. The Simpson's Wine Estate is owned and run by Charles and Ruth Simpson, who for 18 years have had an estate down in the south of France called Domaine Saint-Rose, which they established in 2002. And having successfully run that, they decided they had another wine project in them, and they decided they would look to establish an English wine project producing fine, sparkling wine. Now, they recognised early on in their efforts to set it up that because England, which is suitable for making great sparkling wine, has a marginal climate, the selection of the site for their vineyards was critical. So they did a lot of research, and they concluded that the East of Kent, with its increased amount of sunshine and warmth, was a very suitable place to start looking for the required vineyard sites. In terms of an actual vineyard site, what was required also was a southerly facing slope and preferably with chalk soils. If, Jacopo, if you could start changing the slides, it's going to take a bit of skill to work out which one I'm talking about. Ah, we're right. So the slide that's showing now, that's Charles and Ruth Simpson, the domain St. Rose down in the Languedoc region of the south of France. And that's where their first estate is. Still running very successfully. And as I said, they decided to, in 2010-11, to embark on a new venture as well, producing English sparkling wine, fine English sparkling wine. So they decided on East Kent. So if you can move forward to, there's a map of East Kent in the slides. That's the one. So the beauty of East Kent is, as I said, sunshine and warmth and an abundance of chalk soil sites with chalk soils. So Charles and Ruth, having decided on East Kent, did further research and found 2 sites that were very suitable near the village of Barham. If you can move on to the next slide, Jacopo. So this is our Roman Road vineyard. It's so named after the Roman road that runs nearby in the beautiful Elam Valley outside of Canterbury. And you can see this is when the vineyard was literally just, well, about a year old. And you can see the soil there, that's that chalk soil poking through. It's very shallow topsoil with chalk and flint, very typical of the area and perfect for planting a new vineyard. Also surrounding the vineyard, which provides shelter, are mature trees. So the trees on 4 sides, which provides shelter and creates a heat trap for successfully growing vines. Charles and Ruth chose, as they were making sparkling wine, they planted the 3 classic varieties: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, the classic Champagne traditional method varieties. But as well as planting sparkling wine clones, they did also Burgundy clones to provide depth and complexity to the sparkling wines they wanted to produce. So they were in 2014, first in 2016. Go ahead, Jacopo, that'd be great. So this is the more mature vineyard showing the vines growing. So in the vintage, we produced sparkling wine successfully. Our first sparkling wine we released was a sparkling rosé, and then followed by our Chalkland's Classic Cuvée, which is a blend of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. We've found since that the vineyard has been very suitable also for producing still wines because we've used the Burgundy clones and being able to get the grapes ripe enough. Again, it's down to the site selection. If we go to the next slide, Jacopo, that'll be great. So everything we do at Simpsons, firstly, from the start, including planting the vineyard, was about quality. So we use Burgundy clones, sparkling wine clones. We hand harvest, hand prune everything, and the winery is about 5 minutes away by tractor. We also planted another vineyard, the other side of Barham, on a similar south-facing slope, slightly steeper and slightly higher, to the same varieties. And that was planted in 2016 and 2017, with a small section planted this year as well. Again, from that vineyard, we're finding we're getting not only we are able to produce high quality sparkling wine, but also some producing the ripeness to produce still wines. So we continue to win accolades, and comment made about how our wines have amazing texture, but also we aim very much to produce wines that reflect the provenance, the terroir, which our vineyards are sited on, and that's what makes them distinctive, plus the very skilled winemaking. So if I go to the next slide, and I'll just go through our range of wines we produce. But before that, I'd just like to show you, this is our wine press. It gives you an idea of our efforts to use the latest technology as well as traditional techniques to produce the highest quality. So this is a membrane press imported. We have 2 of those, a very significant investment. And you might notice the bag on the right-hand side. This is part of what we call the initus system. So the grapes are brought to the winery very quickly, within 10 or 15 minutes usually of being picked, down to the winery and loaded in via that hopper into the press. The bag there is full of nitrogen, which we blanket the grapes with, and that blankets it and keeps it free from oxygen in the atmosphere and keeps the freshness in the grapes. Well, I think we're one of 2 wineries in the UK that have this system, and it really has made a difference in terms of keeping the grapes very fresh and the quality there, but it also gives us an option to either use it or not use it. The same grapes, using that system and not using the system gives us some added depth and complexity in choice. Jacopo, if we could go to the next slide. So as I said, everything's about quality, and we've invested heavily. It's a modern winery, but we also use traditional techniques. And again, all our efforts is to present wines that reflect where they come from, the provenance of them. We've experimented with using wild yeast as well as cultured yeast. We even used, last year, the winemakers were using some small batches using foot stomping. So it's all about adding texture to the wines. If we could go to the next slide, please, Jacopo. So these are some automatic riddling racks, again, with the wines, sparkling wines. We use wines after they've gone through tirage. We use various lengths of maturation on yeast lees, which provide a great deal of texture and character to the wines. So with our sparkling wines, we have different periods of wines maturing on yeast lees, depending on the style and the wine we're producing. Next slide, please, Jacopo. So within our range of wines, we have a range of sparkling wines. We produce the Canterbury Rose, which is a sparkling rosé made in the traditional method. Lovely fresh style with nice bright fruit. It's made from 100% Pinot Noir, and there's a nice fresh fruity style. Our main sparkling wine is the Chalklands Classic Cuvée, which is a blend of Chardonnay, 60% Chardonnay and 40% Pinot Noir. Currently, in future vintages, it will have some Pinot Meunier in there as well. And it's all about producing lovely, generous sparkling wines, very refreshing acidity and depth and complexity, at the same time as being approachable. Our third sparkling wine is the Flint Fields, which is a Blanc de Noir, which is purely Pinot Noir, made from Pinot Noir Burgundy clone. It has tremendous depth, but yet finesse. It has richness, again, with elegance. And we only make that in very small quantities. That was matured on yeast lees for around about 24, 28 months. And then our final sparkling wine in the range is White Cliffs, which is a Blanc de Blanc. Hasn't been released yet, our first one. It's going to spend probably around about 4 years on yeast lees before it's ready. And again, that's an investment in quality. We're very excited when this wine comes out. We think it's going to be extraordinary. But again, it's very promising from a young vineyard, the quality we're getting. The next slide, thanks, Jacopo, I think should be the Gravel Castle Chardonnay, which is, well, first of our still wines. Again, we're very excited about the still wines we're producing. This is a unoaked, fresh style of Chardonnay, very being described by a number of commentators that as very Chablis-like. In fact, they talk about it being like the Chablis that Chablis used to produce, with that lovely, defined, fresh citrus fruit, some flintiness, some green apple fruit. It's just proving to be very attractive and bringing people back to Chardonnay and actually changing people's perception of English still wines. The next slide, please, Jacopo, which shows a couple of more of our still wines. On the left is our Railway Hill Rosé, which is a lovely, pale, fresh style of rosé, 100% Pinot Noir, presented in a fantastic, I think, really attractive bottle with a glass stopper. We're one of the first to use the glass stopper in the UK. And this wine is drinking really well, lovely.
All right, I think we've lost Harry. For the minute, we are going to move on to the next presentation, Angus, if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, so I'll go quickly to the first of your slides, and yeah, feel free to go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks for joining us on this session. I'm Angus Lugston. I'm the co-founder and director of Salcombe Distilling Company, and the brand I'm here to talk to you about this afternoon is Salcombe Gin, our kind of first brand. So we established the company, actually myself and my business partner Howard, in the summer of 2014, and then we spent the next 2 years building this fantastic distillery you see in front of you, which is down and located on the water in Salcombe in South Devon. For those of you who may not be familiar with Salcombe, it's a beautiful seaside town with long-standing traditions. These days, it's kind of known as one of the kind of second home capitals of the UK. I think it vies its choice between Sandbanks and Salcombe as the most expensive place to buy a second home in the UK. And we're actually one of the only distilleries in the world that you can directly access by boat. So that picture you're looking at there is right at the back of our distillery, where we have a tasting bar and a gin school and a victualler's shop, in addition to the distillery itself. So Salcombe has this amazingly rich nautical history and history for producing, handcrafted goods, and it dates back a lot further. I don't know how the resolution is coming through here, but I'll just kind of talk around these slides. So it was very famous in the 19th century for something called the Salcombe fruiters, and these were beautiful schooners, sailing vessels, shown in that photo, that were built in Salcombe and the surrounding area, crewed by local men, and they used to ply their trade across the world, but a huge amount of trade in the Mediterranean, carrying citrus fruits and spices, oranges from the Azores, and further climes of the Caribbean, carrying pineapples. And at their time, pineapples were very much regarded as a luxury status symbol almost. And they used to import in their heyday up to 80% of the citrus fruits and spices into England's ports, mainly into London, Liverpool, Bristol, Hull and Southampton were the main ports that they served. And at the end of the fruit trade, when it started to be replaced by steam-powered vessels, they diversified into working into Newfoundland and on the east coast of the US. But they've actually ended up far and wide, vessels being reported ending up in San Francisco and over Asia Pacific, and beautiful vessels, copper sheathed hulls to age their passage through the water. And it's actually this history of the Salcombe fruiters that has really inspired our products. So actually, when we were developing our first gins, and even still to this day, we traced back through the cargo manifest the citrus fruits and spices and a number of other botanicals that they used to carry. And we use those same produce from the same regions that used to be carried on board the Salcombe fruiters. So we're pretty traditional. I guess we're relatively small. I like to think to us as kind of luxury by design, kind of craft by nature, by scale. And we have an amazing attention to detail and passion for everything that we do. So we have a number of stills at our distillery, but our main still is the one you see in front of you here, which is a 450 litre Arnold Holstein still produced for us in Markdorf in Germany. And the quality of the liquid it produces is absolutely stunning. We have a pair of 60 litre flame-fired stills that we also use. We tend to use those for very small batch or for recipe development and R&D projects. Plus then we have 10 smaller, even really small stills, 2.5 litre stills that reside in our gin school and R&D lab. And actually every gin that we produce starts out life on one of these little 2.5 litre alembic stills. And they produce, enough for a bottle, versus Providence here, the still in front of you. We produce roughly 600 bottles, 70 cl bottles per batch, roughly speaking. Very traditional, London dry for most of our gins, not all, but one-shot method for them all. So for every batch of gin that we produce, there's no shortcuts. We take just the carefully weighed out quantity of botanicals for that one production run, together with our English wheat spirit and our naturally soft water sourced from Dartmoor, just for that, producing that still run. So we don't produce a concentrate or a multi-shot method that a lot of the bigger boys do. We just believe you get the best out of your botanicals by basically producing them one still run at a time. And there's a number of features of this still. We do have a botanical vapor infusion steam basket there as well, which we use for some recipes. But for our classic citrus-led London dry gin, we just stick to using the still. So I stick to using the main pot and side column. So all our botanicals we use, I mentioned obviously a lot of them inspired by the Salcombe fruiters. But they're all hand-sourced. We know the provenance of every single one of them. So little details, we use organic unwaxed citrus fruit. So in our start point gin, we have 3 citrus peels: red grapefruit, lemon and lime. And they are hand-peeled every morning prior to distillation, just to ensure we get the best of the essential oils out. We don't tend to macerate or soak anything in the still overnight. And then some botanicals, for example, our Rosé Saint Marie gin that I'll get onto, we put the more delicate botanicals, some of the floral botanicals, in the vapor infusion basket rather than having them boiling away in the pot. So we tend to try and use as many kind of local ingredients as we can, in addition to obviously some of the ones that we source from further afield. We're very traditional. We use Macedonian juniper. It gives us a really good piney resinous juniper hit, which is exactly what we want in our gin. But then we use English coriander seed that's grown for us in Sussex, that gives a lovely lemon warming brightness to the gin, and a whole bunch of depending on which gin we're distilling, local botanicals. Sometimes they're foraged from along the coastline, whether it be sugar kelp, various other seaweeds, or wild forage fennel we've used. So it really depends on what gin we're distilling. And then we're very fortunate down where we are, and that our water is perfect for distillation. It's naturally soft. We don't really have to do anything to it. So obviously the water we're putting in the still, during the distillation, we are effectively distilling. And then we then add water to obviously bring it down to bottling strength. And that at that point, the water's been effectively purified, running it through a deionizer unit and a reverse osmosis filter to basically strip out any residual mineral content that's in there. So it's interesting thing about the brewing, about putting it some of it back in. We actually want to strip it out. It could potentially cause our gin to go hazy. So we want kind of purified water that we're using there. So we have 2 core, what I would call commercial release gins. So Salcombe Gin Start Point, which I hope a lot of you will be familiar with. This was our first gin. We launched in summer 2016, almost exactly 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago now. And it was really inspired by, we set out to create a classic citrus-led London dry gin. Luckily, myself and my business partner Howard, we both had a preference for citrus-led gins, so we were able to launch with one gin rather than two. And it took about 18 months to develop this recipe. A lot of fun, doing lots of blind taste tests of early developments, normally at 10 o'clock in the morning, because that's when your palate's at its best. And we wanted to create something that was basically timeless and elegant that people would always go back to. And so we got 13 botanicals in there, a lot of fresh citrus, lovely hints of sweetness from licorice and angelica root, and a nice bit of green cardamom that isn't there so much for the flavour of cardamom, because not many people pick it up, but it helps lengthen the finish on the palate. And we always recommended this is served with a slice of red grapefruit. Doesn't need anything else. The grapefruit's the dominant citrus in it, and I always say, only garnish with something that's in the gin, and preferably not with something that then gets stuck in your teeth as you're trying to enjoy your drink. So we've been really fortunate out of the block. Start Point pretty much won every top award in the world, both regionally, nationally, and internationally. So our first double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, 3 stars at Great Taste, a platinum award at the Beverage Tasting Institute in the US with a score out 96 out of 100, and so it goes on. So we've been really, really proud of this, and it seems to have a very loyal following. Obviously, the next gin, as I'm sure you've seen, this massive explosion in the pink gin category, and I use that term loosely because pink, as you know, is a colour, not a flavour. And the trouble is, in my opinion, a lot of the products in the sector are overly sweet and quite often artificially coloured and artificially flavoured. So we decided if we were going to develop a pink gin, that we wanted to do something slightly different. And I love a glass of dry Provence rosé wine. So I said, well, why not create something that's inspired by the south of France, the vibrant lifestyle of the Mediterranean, and create something that is soft but still dry, so still getting a load of fruit coming across it, but with no added sugar, no artificial flavors, and no artificial colors. And so that's what we've done with this. So we've distilling with English strawberries, together with a load of Provence herbs, lemon verbena, orange blossom, a little bit of lavender, a hint of bit of white pepper, and it creates a beautifully balanced, very different to our Start Point, but very Moorish gin. And again, this actually just won our 3rd double gold medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, making it the only dry pink gin in the world, and one of to have ever won it, and only one of 2 pink gins to have ever won a double gold. So we're really, really pleased with this. Served, you can garnish with strawberry or lemon, or a bit of both. I serve it in a wine glass with tonic, and you can adjust the tonic whether you want light or regular, depending upon your preferred level of sweetness. So those are 2 core commercial gins. We then have, some of you may have seen, something called a Voyager series, and these are kind of limited edition gins, and each one is developed in collaboration with either a world-renowned chef or an iconic winemaker. So we've had 4 in the series so far, and they're a joy to work with. It's a proper collaborative partnership, and they're designed to kind of reflect the personality, philosophy, and style of the partner we're working with. For these, we've done 4 so far. The first one with Chef Michael Keynes, the second one with Mark Hicks, the third with Dirk Newport at Newport in Portugal, and the 4th with Chef Monica Galetti. That was the most recent one. And we're currently working on the 5th and 6th, the 5th one being with the chef Niall Keating, that just won Great British Menu, who's based in the Cotswolds. So in addition to the gins, we also have, I mentioned, our gin school, amazingly popular attraction, because people want more than just product, they want experience. So the gin school in the top left hand corner, we have a beautiful tasting bar overlooking the water, and we do some pretty cool things like gin delivery services to visiting yachts coming into Salcombe as well. So that just gives you a bit of an overview of some of the aesthetic for Salcombe, as again, located on the coast. So we do a gin butler delivery service, which is quite a lot of fun. And then obviously most recently, like many distilleries, we've diversified during lockdown, creating hand sanitizer for key workers, frontline workers, and the NHS. And then we've kept being inundated with requests to commercialize it and turn it into a product. So we've just launched our Safe Harbor hand sanitizer, which is actually distilled rather than just blended, and we're actually created a kind of a base recipe using some wild coastal botanicals, so it also smells fantastic as well as being functional. And hopefully that's a useful overview of Salcombe Gin and our brand, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. That was great. Thanks very much, Angus. So we're all back here. It's really amazing to see how all your products actually speak of the place they're from, and I think that's actually what makes them so appealing to people, especially now, especially in these weeks of months of lockdown. It was great to hear you, Sarah, talking about how you make a Kentish ale. You really have to use Kentish hops. We don't often hear this related to beer. We always think of beer as something that you can do anywhere with any ingredient. So it was really interesting. I was about to ask you a question, Sarah, because your perspective from the production side of things, and how has this lockdown situation impacted on production? Did you have to adapt? I guess you had to adapt to the circumstances, but also adapt in terms of what styles you had to brew over these weeks, and what you are going to brew, and how you're going to package it as pubs reopen in about a week from now, roughly.
So yes, definitely, because as a brewery we own quite a lot of pubs. Immediately when we took quite fast action, we sort of predicted that pubs were going to be closing. So the week before lockdown, we immediately stopped packaging in what we call large packs, so kegs and casks, because there's no need for it. If there's no pubs, there's no large pack necessity. And usually our brewery is about a 50-50 split. So small packs, so cans and bottles mainly, is about 50%, and then about 30% keg, and then about 20% cask. Obviously, that 50% large pack completely dropped off immediately over the weekend. So we actually managed to increase our bottling up to about sort of our usual 60% of our sort of usual volume to compensate for that. And I think initially supermarkets were struggling to get supplies. Obviously, we were struggling to get supplies into supermarkets because beer is unfortunately not an essential like toilet roll or pasta or anything else. But eventually, once they started opening slots for us in the supermarkets, we managed to provide a very consistent supply to them. And so we managed to get, especially to our local supermarkets, we managed to get 100% supply rate to our supermarkets, which is really good as a relationship with the supermarkets as well. So I think we actually managed to get some really good business off the supermarkets, and actually some new products out there during lockdown, which is really surprising and very good. But production, obviously all the office staff were sent home, all the pubs, all their staff were furloughed, but production carried on. That sort of carried the business by producing for the supermarket. So we were incredibly lucky that we had that opportunity, that we could still continue with production, because otherwise I think we would have had to have completely furloughed everyone. So it was a good opportunity to continue going with the business. But now it's all hands on deck for the pubs reopening, which is good news, but it's busy. So yeah, we've now started cask racking again. We've had to look into potentially extending some of the shelf life on some of the kegs, because a lot of the pubs still have kegs out in trade. Kegs usually have a 6-month shelf life on them, so anything that we produced at the beginning of March is still just about in date. So we've done extensive testing and tasting to make sure that's still okay. But cask only has 6 weeks shelf life on it because it's unfiltered and unpasteurized. So, that obviously had to be all thrown out, which is a horrendous shame and a lot of hard work. But our trade quality services have been incredibly busy, going around all of our own pubs and also all the free trade pubs, tipping a lot of beer down the drain, which is really sad.
Really, really sad. Terrible. All right. So thanks very much, Sarah. Harry, I have a question for you instead, and it's, I mean, obviously, compared to beer, wine is, the cycle of the vine doesn't stop, even if there is coronavirus out there. Nature doesn't know there is a global pandemic. My question, going back to when you were talking about your still wines, and unfortunately communication dropped. We've been talking about English and Welsh wine up until perhaps a couple of years ago, and it was mostly about sparkling wine, classic traditional method sparkling wine. But over the past couple of years, increasingly we talk a lot more about still wines as well. Climate change might be one of the reasons, but definitely Simpsons has been one of the leaders in terms of the production of still wines, and a still Pinot Meunier. I mean, who does that? Do you think that actually the fact that now when we talk about English and Welsh wine, we talk about a more diverse range of styles, does that make it more mature? Does that make the English wine industry more mature?
Well, it's certainly very exciting. I think there's a number of factors playing in. Firstly, with us, we've got these Burgundy clones, so it makes it a lot easier to make a still wine. Rather, I think previously in the English wine industry, quite a few producers were trying to make a still wine using sparkling wine clones, and they're not suitable. The acidity is too high, generally. So the use of more Burgundy and still wine clones, particularly the classic varieties, really helped develop the still wine thing. As you say, there's a diverse offer now from the English wine industry, and people are getting to know they're having better sites, they're getting to know their vineyards better, there's more professional winemaking involved, and a bit of experimentation too. That's the other thing. There's a lot of experimentation going on. People aren't just going down the same old traditional roads. They're trying all sorts of different things. So you're getting natural wines, orange wines made in England now. It's all those factors. But the key is, I think, is having that right site to start with, to be able to get it ripe enough. Not all sites are suitable, and not all years is it going to be suitable. But we're quite excited where we are. We're only young, but we can see that we can, with the sites, consistently produce the ripeness required to make a good still white wine. But the other key element is the winemaker, the skill of introducing generosity and texture through the way, like using maturing on lees, still wine that adds texture, mouthfeel to the wine really helps, and it balances out on the one hand fruit and on the other hand the acidity, and it creates a balance in the wine. Whereas in the past, people have thought that English wines, the acidity is too aggressive. So it helps balance that out. So it's going to get better. Wines are more available nowadays as well, so they're more accessible. So the future's looking really good for still wine as well as sparkling wine in England.
And just a very quick one from the floor. People were wondering whether there were any plans to diversify into any of the more inverted commas traditional English grape varietals like Bacchus or Rondo. Are there any plans in that sense?
Not at this stage. I mean, from the start, it was all about concentrating on those classic 3 varieties. And in fact, I think what we're doing, rather than introducing new varieties, we're experimenting with making different wines from those existing varieties within that. So as I said, as you pointed out, a white Pinot Meunier is an example of where we've experimented and it's come up very well. I think we're going to leave those varieties to other people because they're probably passionate about them. The founders aren't so keen on those sort of varieties, so we're going to do that to other people. But again, that just helps with the diversity that's available here in the UK.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much, Henry. I've got a few questions for Angus. So one, just very practical question. People are wondering, when will the distillery bar and gin school be open?
Very good question. So the distillery hasn't closed. We've been producing throughout lockdown. It's just been closed to the public. But we actually reopened our victualler's shop a couple of weeks ago, and that's now open 7 days a week. And we've actually got a meeting this week to work out exactly when we're going to reopen the bar and gin school. It will, in all likelihood, the bar will definitely be at some point in July. The gin school, to be determined, not yet decided. I mean, part of the attraction of the gin school, it's a very social experience. We've got 10 miniature stills and people come together, and by the end of their session, they're all friends and they're all tasting each other and sticking their finger under the distillate as it's dripping out and comparing notes. And I think having a socially distanced gin school, it just doesn't have quite the same ring. But we are determined to get it back open. We've been using it a lot for some recipe development, whilst we've been in lockdown. But it'd be nice to see some people starting to come back through the doors. So bar definitely July, gin school hopefully shortly thereafter.
Okay. There are a few other practical questions. Someone is wondering whether you've got plans to expand sales beyond the West Country. Yeah, well,
it's I'm a bit concerned if they think we don't sell beyond the West Country. So, I mean, we've grown from obviously our small start down in Devon, but we're very much available across the UK, both on and off trade. We work with all the main big wholesalers. We just launched during lockdown nationally with John Lewis. So we're getting all their stores as they reopen and online. And we are through lots of independents. We're in Marks and Spencers and Waitrose in the southwest and expanding out of there. And then we also export. So we started exporting to China, having had quite a few trips over there in the last couple of years. Actually, just before lockdown, in fact, our first proper shipment of Salcombe gin, both Start Point and Rosy Saint-Marie, arrived the day before they locked down. But surprisingly, they've sold most of it during lockdown. I'm not quite too sure how they've done it, which is great news. And we're just launching in the US this month. So in New York and across New England, so Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So we've got boots on the ground now in the States, and we're working with a couple of the key distributors there. And then we also export a little bit to further afield into not further afield, but closer by in Europe. But really only just starting to do a bit more export. But nationally, we also been working on a project which has obviously been slightly delayed to install the world's first ever distillery at sea with P&O Cruises for their new flagship vessel Iona that we hope we're supposed to launch in May, but we hope will launch later this year, hopefully towards the end of the year. And as part of that, we're supplying across the fleet. So it's about 50,000 passengers a week when they're running at full bore. About 5,000 on Iona, and we're putting a gin school, a gin blending school on board Iona, and in addition to a small still of which we've created a fantastic gin for them that they'll be distilling on board, and that will also then be distilling in Salcombe and supplying to the duty free and across the fleet.
Okay.
So yeah, we're definitely expanding out further afield.
So people can definitely find your gene well beyond the the West Country, and hopefully very soon in the on-trade too.
Yep.
As pubs and bars and restaurants reopen. I think there are quite a few questions about the idea of behind regional identity that we touched on before. So I kind of opened this question to everyone. What does it mean to be, for instance, on the export market? What does it mean to be to have a product that is quite markedly British? Can you market it? Does it work? And within the local market, do you need something a little bit more specific? Does your product sell better if it has more of a regional identity? For instance, Kentish ales or wine from Kent or gin from a specific area. So who wants to? Sarah, if you want to start yourself.
So for us, we went down the line of actually deciding to get protected geographical indication for our Kentish ales. So we actually are audited to that, and so it's for us, it's quite an important thing. It's almost like a beer style that's unique to our beers. And we obviously use that in branding. Spitfire many times has used things like the RAF target on its caps, and we use the Union Jack flag a lot on our marketing. So it's seen as a very British product. We've also got Royal Warrant on Spitfire as well. So that's seen as a very sort of prestigious thing, that if the British monarchy are drinking it, then it's good as a marketing tool for the rest of the world. So it's definitely seen alongside sort of like Range Rover and very, very British sort of iconic brands. So worldwide, it's seen as a very typical British product. And Spitfire, especially within the name, I mean, it was originally built to commemorate the Battle of Britain, just as a one-off celebration beer, but it's now become our most prominent brand within our company. So it's sort of, I think people hold the name Spitfire very close to their heart in Britain, because sort of harking back to the war, it was a very important piece of equipment for us and during the war. So I think it's very iconically British, and that's seen worldwide. So definitely for us, it's all about sort of the locality of the hops, the fact that they are literally on our doorstep. It would be criminal for us not to use these very, very special hops that are on our doorstep and to make an entire beer style based on those hops. So for us, it is really about singing about those beautiful hops that are grown. Literally, I mean, half of the farms that are growing our hops for us right now, we can see out the window of the brewery. So it's incredibly local, which is very good for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, amazing. I'm a great supporter of English hops, and I also think that brewers should use a lot more local hops. That's definitely more sustainable than getting hops shipped from all over the place. So, Harry, do you have anything from your side, from the wine side of things?
Yes, I mean, again, like Sarah was saying, I think the perception of British quality and design and luxury is quite strong around the world, and it certainly opens a lot of doors. And we're trying to make fine traditional method sparkling wines and still wines. We really want our packaging to reflect that, and that in combination with the image of British luxury and design, it works very well, and is starting for us to open up export doors for us. So things are starting to go very well in Norway, and we're about to launch in Sweden. We're in Denmark and places like that. So that's really helped. So on the export side of things, locally, yes, we very much we work closely with local customers, farm shops, etc., and restaurants and gastropubs, because they're presenting, their guests, their visitors, whether they're from far afield or locally, want local products and they want to eat food, local food, and have local wines with it. So we're very much hanging on that. And then on a national basis, we work with a number of other Kent wine producers with a group called the Wine Garden of England, and we're going out and jointly promoting Kent nationally as a fantastic place to grow grapes and make wine, particular character and a diverse offering. So we're doing it at sort of 3 different levels, and it all, I think, really works. But the key at the end of the day is, as I said before, we're trying to make wines that really reflect where we are, where the vineyards are, and have that sort of regional character which we take out to the world.
Excellent. Angus, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean the region, obviously being a Devon brand, we started down here, and we kind of view that Devon and Cornwall and Somerset as part of the greater southwest, and we're very fortunate that we've always had a high influx of visitor footfall. It is a very popular tourist area. So obviously being based in Salcombe, we decided if we were going to be Salcombe Gin, we needed to be true to that and actually be a business that's based in Salcombe, contributing to the local economy and employing people. We built the company quite quickly to over 30 people. Not just in Salcombe, but spread further afield through the sales team across the country as well. And we work a lot in partnership with local companies, whether it be local brewery like Salcombe Brewery, South Hams Brewery as well, and also just other local kind of partner businesses. It might be the likes of Ribeye, who produce fantastic rigid inflatable boats that we work with in Dartmouth, really kind of selling that whole lifestyle, which is very much on and around the water down here. But I definitely think it has an important piece to play, particularly when we're telling the story. We've always been very fortunate we don't have to make anything up, so we've got this lovely rich history, and people want more and more. They want provenance and they want integrity of the brands, and they want something that's a little bit more than skin deep. So they want to interact with the brand, and right through from your story, your packaging, your tone of voice and social media, everything that you do, it's about encouraging more and more people to interact. And particularly obviously in lockdown, the social media and the internet has been absolutely vital to try and get that across. And we've done things which were quite a lot of fun at the time. So we created the world first crowdsourced gin on Instagram Live, with all the proceeds going to the NHS coronavirus charity, and that was pretty cool, getting everyone to involved on Instagram Live suggestion to making suggestions for the botanicals to use, and then creating 100 bottles that were sold through that session. And it was a really, really nice gin called Nightingale. But it's definitely, I think, using some regional produce, regional partners as well. The likes of this next Voyager series with Chef Niall Keating, using produce from up in the Cotswolds that he's been sending down. So normally when we create these things, we have a chef, they have the chef come to the gin school and work with us. Obviously not being able to do that. So we've been developing recipes over video calls. We're sending botanicals down that've been growing in the garden at Watley Manor and around. So yeah, regional identity. It's quite interesting when we're taking the brand to China and to the States now. The regional identity, Salcombe is known within the yachting community further afield, but that's probably pretty much it. And you quite often say you have to. Well, it's a bit like it's close to Plymouth. They always ask where you're close to. And in the US, I definitely find you say, well, it's Salcombe's like the Hamptons of the UK, and people get it. They immediately get this kind of connection of the kind of nautical lifestyle, aspirational kind of destination. So I think it's just trying to put it in context, but it's definitely what Henry was saying is very true about this luxury. British brands, particularly in the drinks trade, are very much regarded as as operating at the top of the game. Luxury sector. All three brands here we've talked about the attention to detail, the focus on quality, and everything we're doing, and it's all got a fantastic backstory. I mean, ours is the shortest by some margins as the company, but the history of Solcombe and the Solcombe fruiters, which we've kind of very much tapped into and kind of taken to heart, I think is key to success of a brand and actually helping people relate to it and giving a bit of warmth to the story as well.
Excellent. Great. Thanks very much, everyone. I think we'll have to wrap it up there because we are a little bit over. But thanks again, everyone, for watching the session today, which was part of Imbibe Live Online, supported by Mezcal Sentir. I would like to thank all the speakers today. Henry, who's has left, probably due to technical issues, Sarah and Angus. All the sessions are, please remember, they're all watchable on demand later from Thursday. Don't forget, there's plenty more sessions tomorrow, so go and check them out. There's really a lot to watch tomorrow again. Up now on Facebook, there is a session on Irish whiskey. And at 5:30 is our day one drinks, where we'll be mixing up some cocktails with Sentir Mezcal. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Great. Right. Thank you very much.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.